Welcome to Sales Velocity TV, where we pull back the curtain on how the top businesses in the world sell more with less resistance. Bringing over 50 plus years of combined sales experience and over 100 million in revenue generated, please welcome the hosts of Sales Velocity TV and two incredibly entertaining gentlemen, Andrew Cass and Aaron Parkinson.
Oh man, I'm sitting here cracking up because you and I get into these crazy conversations pre-show and we stop and go, wait a minute, why aren't we talking about this on the show? We're excited. We have stats, statistics, findings. And I'm like, Aaron, do you know we haven't gone live yet?
I think it's because you and I just enjoy doing this show so much that we're like, okay, what are we covering today? Let's double check, cross eye, dot I's, cross.
But then we get into it and it's like, why are we into it? We're not live.
Well, we're live.
Oh, geez, we're live. Good to be. Listen, we're depending on when you're watching this, we're actually live after a little while of not being live. You and I decided to do the European vacation summers. You did 3 weeks, I did almost 2 weeks, and we didn't do the show live for probably almost a month. It feels good to be back live. I've been watching our recasts; they're fantastic. But really, I'd rather be live, and there's so much going on. And I guess we have a couple big announcements here, depending on when you're watching this. We are on something like show 140. We are in year 3, and we are going to completely rebrand and redo the style of this show. We have elevated to one of the top shows in the sales and marketing category, which is not a big category. Sales and marketing is a very small category in the podcast world. It's done very well, but you and I have just bigger things to talk about. We want to go way beyond sales and marketing, and we're gonna rebrand the show soon. Nothing will change here. It will just, the name and the images will change. And we're going to be really diving into bigger business concepts, bigger political concepts, bigger health and wellness concepts, life concepts, personal development concepts, which we tend to veer off to anyway. So I'm excited about the show being about something a little bit more broad, more of a Rogan type effect, or more of a, the Patrick Bet-David show is a great one we like a lot. More along those lines, where open conversations, guests, a lot of cool stuff. You can only talk about the sales arena for so long. We've been doing it for 20 plus years. And even sometimes we want to talk about other stuff. So I'm excited about that.
I think that's what's driving it is you and I both feel like we have to reel ourselves in on talking about the things we want to talk about, because we want to come back to the main title of the show. And then I think we've just had this epiphany where we're like, it's our show. We can do what the hell we want. And there's things that we want to talk about that we think are important to people that are going to help them improve their lives. And we want to talk about them. So
well,
there's going to
interestingly, Aaron, the topics that we veer off the sales topics on, we've probably done dozens, have always been the ones that we've gotten the most feedback on as, hey, that was awesome. I didn't know that stuff. That was incredible. Wow. All of that has been what we've heard. So I think anything just needs a rebrand and a reface and a 2.0 at times, and that's what we're going to do with this show, and more to come on that. But today we're talking about the tale of two internets. This is a fascinating phenomenon going on right now that I'm not exactly sure, Aaron. I think you and I live in a bubble to some degree. We're so deep into the world of business ownership and entrepreneurship, and our circles are very different than the general circles. We are very anti-mainstream media, anti-establishment. And once in a while, I venture into the abyss, and I will speak and communicate with somebody who lives in, I guess, the real world, the world of being fed information from CNN and just taking it, no questions asked, just whatever it is. Sure, I'll do it. Just very compliant. Like I've never done well in that environment. I'm sort of anti-establishment. I'm a big skeptic. I like a lot of questions. And the tale of two internets is fascinating because you and I have been internet marketing pioneers. We know the internet as good as anybody. We've been in the internet marketing arena, you since 2004, me since 2005.
Yep.
I don't know what the math is on that, but it's approaching 20 years, combined almost 50. And what's happened over the last couple of years is another internet has gotten carved out due to the censorship of the current internet and the current media. This is really interestingly, it's just 2 to 3 years in only. And why are we talking about this on a sales show? Because it's just one of those topics where, as an advertiser, as a marketer, as a salesperson, and then just as an entrepreneur who likes to know what's going on and wants to understand politics and geopolitics and censorship and some really interesting things going on that have never happened in American, at least in U.S. society before, it's fascinating how we're starting to divide here and live two different worlds when it comes to media. That's what we're going to talk about here today.
Yeah, and I think it's a good topic because where my brain has been at for the last year is the majority of our marketing goes into what I call the big four.
Yeah.
Right now, it goes into the meta products, which is Facebook and Instagram. It goes into YouTube, it goes into TikTok, and it goes into the major search engines. And the big leader there is Google, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm starting to look at branching out into the Twitters, the Rumbles, the Reddits, where there seems to be very different people and very different conversations. And I'm only doing that strictly from a different business. It's just a business strategy, as in what does this group resonate with, and how profitable could it be marketing into these other channels? And Twitter's not in its infancy, but it's in a resurrection, obviously.
It's a complete reface.
Twitter to X, Elon's involvement, public, free speech being really pushed back into that system. Yep. Rumble was always a free speech system. What was the other one you were talking about? Not Reddit.
The biggie is Substack, and I'm actually getting ready to put a publication personally, a personal project on Substack. Substack is a blogging platform that also has a pay feature, which is nice because if you do any kind of paywalls or subscriptions, that's a really cool feature, but also no censorship. And some people are watching this now and they're like, what are these guys talking about? Censorship? This is America. This is a democracy. What do they mean? And I say that because I've been having some conversations out there. Me and one of my good friends were in Cleveland, Ohio. You'll love the story, Aaron. we're testing the market, so to speak, with this stuff. We're in Cleveland, Ohio, at one of Dan Kennedy's private events. Me and my good friend Brian, one of my best friends, and so we're taking an Uber downtown to go to dinner in Cleveland, and the Uber drivers are usually. Let me find out what's going on in the real world. So we're talking politics. We're talking about what's going on and the latest drama with the White House or whatever. And I'm always talking a little bit loud just because I want to just see what's going on. I don't hang out in Main Street that much. So as we're going through all the topics and essentially smashing the current administration for their, everything they do is some sort of, everything they do is like a giant test, right? Everything's like a giant test. Let's just test this for $2 billion. Let's just test this for $18 billion. Let's just test changing a kid's surgery for $100K. Like everything's a big test. No proof of concept, right? So we're talking about all that. And then Brian's like, you're kind of getting loud. The guy driving. Well, let's see what he. So my buddy goes, hey, so sir, not to bug you or anything, but so where do you stand on this conversation we're having right now? We're talking politics and all that, and freedom versus not freedom, and censorship, and he didn't even know what was going on. He's like, I kind of like the Biden administration because I have a lot of student loan debt, and I heard they might forgive it. And I'm like, so he just bought your vote and bought your support, but otherwise you don't even have any idea what else is going on. It's just fascinating to me that we're in such uncharted territory, and for some reason it's the business owners, it's the entrepreneurs, it's really the independent analyst type thinking people that know what's going on that even understand there's another internet. To my point, there's a Substack, there's a Rumble, there's an alternative now for everything. There's an alternative for YouTube. YouTube is a censorship complex now, by the way. There's an alternative for Facebook, and there's an alternative for Instagram as well. Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Now there's Rumble, Substack, and Twitter. If you look at the conversations, Aaron, taking place on those three and these three, right? So Rumble is a wide open video platform. YouTube is not. Substack is a wide open content platform. Facebook is not. Twitter is a wide open conversation, town hall, whatever you want to call it. Instagram is not. It is so fascinating to go back and forth and watch what's going on politically, geopolitically, money, health, pharma, that there are two different conversations happening, and you better be pretty good at analyzing both sides so you can somehow find out what's going on. Usually it lands somewhere in the middle. But lately, it hasn't really been landing in the middle all that much. It's mainly been landing in the side of free speech and open conversation. And when you get over there, you're like, it's kind of hard to argue with what's happening right now because they're really overreaching so much on the other side. Does that make sense? I know it's like people are like, what are you talking about? There are two different internets. And this is coming from guys who've been around since before Google, before Facebook, before social media, before video. We've seen the internet We've seen the initial architecture of the internet. That's why I think I'm so hypersensitive to it, because I remember the internet when there was only Yahoo as a search engine. There was nothing else. I was selling products online through Yahoo Overture with no video, no social media, nothing. No Google, nothing. And you were as well. So we have a very different perspective of what's going on, but it's very, very interesting. And I think in a second we'll talk about where does the podcast audio media fit in now, which is completely uncensored at this point, which is where all the real big conversations are happening. And frankly, it's where all the truth and transparency is today. It's one of the reasons why we did a whole show on RFK Jr. And now this guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, is awesome. And these guys are just elevating by the podcast. And Rogan did a whole show with Patrick Bet-David on this, and that was their focal point, was the podcast is going to drive the next election. I agree.
Well, we're at a really interesting time in not only where you gather your information, but also where you market your information, because there's a lot of different opportunities to do your testing and see how your product or service lands in these different demographics. And we titled this episode "The Tale of Two Internets," but it's almost really the tale of two communication portals. And maybe I didn't verbalize that right.
Same thing. You're right.
It's the same thing, right? I was doing some research this week, and what was fascinating was that last year was the first year that streaming services outperformed cable television.
That's another great point, man. People are killing the cable.
Right. So there was a 0.4% increase in the views on streaming, more than cable television. So it was the first year it surpassed it.
Right.
This year it's at 7.5% more. Now, people might say, well, 7.5%, that's not a big number. It's a freaking massive number when you're talking about the entire viewing, inventory of eyeballs. And to do it in a year, to go from a 0.4% surpassing for the first time in history to 7% more now, you start going, okay, well, where's the streaming, right? Well, streaming was sort of established by Netflix as sort of the first big heavy hitter. I don't know if you noticed NFL football, and I know you don't follow it as much as you used to, and even though you used to play football and be a big football guy, I think it's either Sunday Ticket or one of the other ones has now partnered with YouTube television.
Sure, yeah. Saw that.
So now,
they did that with Amazon last year too. Remember, Amazon was streaming Thursday Night Football.
Correct.
I think that was the first year they did that.
Correct. And the thing and
for the
Patrick
non-cable guys, I guess, right?
Patrick Bet-David talked about this earlier this week. He said the only thing that's keeping cable on life support right now is sports.
Yes. Good
because
point.
Nobody's watching anything other than news or sports. But it's really only the older demographic that's watching the news on cable television. The younger demographic is watching it streaming online.
Right.
And these big entities like the NFL or whoever are realizing not only can I stream this, I can own the network myself and I can control the message myself. That's the big one.
You can hold the message longer, right?
Correct.
They also argued in that show that when you are driven by sound bites, because commercials have to come every 6 or 7 minutes, that's really no way to consume information today. Like if you want to have a deep conversation about, I forget what Joe Rogan mentioned in his last concept in his last show, but he said something like, if you want to have a real conversation about the immigration crisis we're dealing with, like we have a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions at the border.
Sure.
Now it's a trafficking crisis. Like that isn't a 5-minute interview on Fox or CNN.
Nope.
That's a 2-hour podcast, he said. And I'm like, that's a great point. If you really want to know what's going on, and RFK Jr. gave a 25-minute speech about it, which was the best overview of what's going on and then the best solution of how to tackle. He's so great with, here's what's going on. Let's face facts, because many don't today. And then here's how to fix it so we can unite everybody. And it always ends with some sort of message of uniting everybody, not demonizing everybody, which political speak tends to veer towards the demonizing of another party, which is normal. That's politics. That's anything. But he tends to find a way to bring it home at the end to how do we all come together and fix a problem that affects everybody negatively, right? He's really great at that, but the other media, isn't allowing that conversation to happen because they profit tremendously from the immigration complex, the military industrial complex, the biopharmaceutical complex. Now the new gender ideology, complex. Anytime something's an industry, an agency, or a complex, it is most likely driven by money and conflicts of interest, and absolutely positively not in the best interest of people, and especially our young people. And that's really what's happening. They're getting greedy at this point. They're making it obvious now that everything's turning into an industrial complex. That's my big gripe. That's why there's now another internet, because people are going, listen, we're going to have some tough conversations. Everything's becoming industrialized. They're industrializing children. They're industrializing climate. They're industrializing medicine. They're industrializing genital removal surgery. I mean, where does it end? Again,
well, and
if
I
it's
think
an industry or a complex, Aaron, I know there's a problem.
And I think that the things that you're talking about and what we're talking about today, what you should be asking yourself is the question, who's controlling the information that I'm watching? And you might say, well, that seems a bit like conspiracy theory-esque or whatever. Okay, I'll give you one example. Okay, cable television survives on advertising, right? They'd survive on commercial advertising revenue derived from inside of their shows. Mm-hmm. There are so many people dropping off of cable television at a rapid rate, and that really the only ones that are still hanging on are sort of that 55 to 60 plus generation who don't want.
They're used to it.
Yeah, they're used to it. They don't want to learn about it, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the most staggering number I heard in the last week was, guess what the percentage of advertising revenue right now on cable television is coming from big pharma?
75%.
I heard 70, could be 75. Now think
it's been that way for a while, Aaron, by the way.
Think about that number.
It's insane.
It's insane.
This has been going on for, I've been critical of this publicly on social media for a very long time. The thing that impresses me the most, I keep coming back to RFK Jr. because I think it's such a phenomenon. Again, we did a whole show on this. It's at salesvelocitytv.com. First executive order he said he's going to do. Day one. I don't know if you know this. Day one. This is amazing. Day one, first executive order. There cannot be pharmaceutical advertising on the television. It's going to be done. Now, it only exists in 2 countries in the world, by the way. It's not allowed anywhere. It's only allowed in America and New Zealand, and New Zealand actually has better regulation around it. America is the wild, wild west. You are full go. Doesn't matter. We'll take all your... CNN takes something like $300 million a year from pharma. So when they dictate the narrative on anything medical, it's like, you got to be kidding me. The entire thing is funded by the manufacturers of medicine. Give me a break, right? And it's black and white. So that's disturbing, but there's solutions. But that's one of the big reasons they don't want this guy around, because that funding, that type of funding doesn't just go to the news networks. That type of funding goes directly to the federal government as well. That's a big partnership right now that under Biden has become the most corrupt partnership in the history of the United States, bar none. There isn't a close second. If you're watching this right now and disagreeing with me, you're invited onto the show to debate with me any time of day, any hour, anywhere, any day, any planet, any country, to tell me how that's not the case. Because right now, pharma and the government are in so deep with their pharma corruption that they can't even get out at this point, so they're censoring people.
So this kind of goes back to my point, which is if you're getting your news about health from cable television. Again,
I can see you doing the math now. You're like, wait a minute, something's not adding up.
We're talking about tales of two information.
Oh, God, it's so painful to watch.
If you're taking your information from a company who 75% of their revenue comes from an industry, how likely do you think it is?
Comes from the sickness industry, not the prevention industry, by the way.
So let's say you're a reporter and you're asked to speak on something health related, and you push it up to the top of the food chain, and it's in contradiction with the advertiser that pays 75% of your bills to keep the lights on. How likely is it that that information is going to be unbiased?
Aaron, the math is as clear as day as it gets. Shockingly, I don't know the number, but it's got to be somewhere in the 20 to 30% range of people who absolutely positively can't wrap their head around this math. But I don't know if it's that they can't, it's that they won't.
I think they're afraid. I think they're afraid.
Well, it's cognitive dissonance in play, and it's like, damn it, I've been fooled for so long. How dare you? Right? It's almost like what's that saying? There's a saying. It's easier to tell someone they've been fooled than to fool them. It's easier to fool someone than tell them they've been fooled. That was it. I forget who said it.
That makes sense.
And that's it. But at some point, you've got to shake the ego, so to speak, and you've got to be able to look at what you said a second ago. Where is the industry, to my point? Where is the money, to your point? Who's driving the revenue to keep the lights on? And my thing is big, and I've been doing a lot of research, and we're getting ready to publish around this, my team and I, is agency capture, industrial complex. Is it an industry? Is this new ideology being pushed onto the nation, whether it be war, gender, pharma, medicine, vaccine, whatever? Is it an industry? Yes or no? That's all I want to know. Is it an industrial complex? Now, the censorship industrial complex is now becoming a thing, and it's becoming profitable, and there's some independent journalists that are doing a phenomenal job covering the censorship the censorship complex, the censorship industrial complex, meaning censorship is now becoming an industry within itself. The most concerning one for me, Aaron, is the industry of what they're doing to kids under the age of 18. You and I think, both agree that if you're over the age of 18, you and I know you can't buy cigarettes under 18. You can't drink under 18. You can't do a lot of things under 18, right? You can't vape, PG, R movies, parental guidance. But for some reason, in certain states in America, they think it's perfectly fine for a boy to change his sex and cut off his genitals and become a man. And in some states, thank God there's legal teams fighting this, man. They'll go around the parents. They've been caught. There's 4 states now. We have a report. There's 4 states now that actually are passing laws. They call the conservatives the extremists for fighting this. But they're passing laws to say, and this is happening in Washington State as we speak, fact, not opinion. They are passing a law, they're trying, I should say, to pass a law that says if a child wants to really change their gender, they can do so privately behind their parents' back. We'll take care of it over here in the state of Washington, state of New Jersey. We'll take care of it. It's good. Don't have to tell your parents. Can you imagine, Aaron, in America?
But you can't.
By the way,
you can't.
I got to stop, though. This is not an opinion. We have the data. We have the bill. And we have the conservative leadership who's stopping it. And we have the legal teams that have already filed the paperwork saying we're coming for you if you come for our kids. So you got to do this today, because there's 30% saying, no, that's just Fox News saying. Nope, it's not. We've got the docs.
Well, and again, you try to strip it down to its most basic form so people can take the emotion out of it and understand it.
You can tell I got a little emotional right there. When it comes to the kids, man,
but that's okay.
I'm coming
It's
for
okay
you
to
if
be
you're coming
emotional
for the
about.
kids.
It's okay to be emotional about those topics, right? What you said is actually the smartest question to ask yourself in that conversation. And I have a little bit of a different vantage point than most people do, because one of my kids is gay, right? And so I've been through that experience as a parent since for years now. And
by the way, not to cut you up, but it is not a gay factor here, by the way. This is
and I'll get to that.
Yeah, okay.
In a second. So her and I have debates all the time, and obviously because she's got her filter that she's seeing it through, and she's like, there's a lot of people that believe they were born in the wrong body, and they can't talk about it, and it can make them suicidal, and it can do all of these things. And we both, her and I, agree 100% that, and this is just me, I do believe some people were born in the wrong body. I do believe they have the choice, and I do believe they'll be happier if they make whatever decision to go whatever. However, I do not agree it's a conversation that should happen in schools to be planting ideas or seeds in people's heads. I don't think you should be talking about any sexuality in schools, period, up until the age of where hormones start to drop, That's 14, right. 15. Exactly. I don't think you should be talking about sexual transformation in schools, period. That's not why I send my kids to school.
Exactly.
And I think that once you become a consenting age, wherever that consenting age is, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, whatever's decided.
Right.
Anybody should be able to do whatever they want because it's your body, and I'm a big believer in your body, your decision, your right. But as a kid, we're telling them you can't buy cigarettes, you can't vape, you can't drink, you can't go in the army, you can't pay taxes, but you can completely change your body. Like, you can't go to a movie that's
PG,
rated
baby.
R.
PG. Parental guidance.
But you can go and do something that can potentially have dramatic psychological and physical effects to your body. And
Happening,
that's
buddy.
okay.
Happening.
That's not okay. And so I have these debates in my own house and with somebody who has her own filter, which I 100% understand, and we debate them, right? And we both have kind of come to agreement on that point, which is there needs to be some patience and some logic around such a dramatic decision.
Yeah, we're talking about medical, invasive, life-changing, hormone-changing. We are not talking about opinions or ideology. You're absolutely right. This is a whole different ballgame.
I wouldn't let my daughter go get breast implants at 15.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Like,
is the same
if she
concept.
wanted, she's like, I have small boobs.
You got to let her
breast.
body completely develop before that happens. And then she needs to be an adult to make that decision. Absolutely right.
If you're an intelligent adult, you don't let your kid tattoo their entire face before they're the age of 19. You say you wait a little, get a little experience, get a little wisdom, and if you want to do your own thing when you leave the house, that's your thing, right?
I just come back to, how is this not common sense? For some, it's a very small. Listen, it's a very small subset of people who don't see this, and they think kids are full. Kids are full game. Anybody that thinks kids are full game with anything invasive like this needs to be locked up. Kids are not full game.
Kids are off limits, right?
Kids are off limits. But by the way, and I don't want to veer off, the current administration in the White House believes kids are fair game. They are subsidizing this, they are condoning this, and they are authorizing taxpayer money to do this. And this is not an opinion. I also have that documentation. So anybody is more than welcome to reach out. I don't like to do opinions all that much on the show, as you know. I like to make sure I'm making fact. I'll give my opinion, but I'm going to make sure that if I'm making a statement like I just made, it's fact-based and I have documentation, which I do.
So let's tie it back around to the beginning of the conversation, right? Where are you getting your information from is a question. What money is backing it is another question.
What industry is behind it?
Right. What industry? Which big pushes of ideology are tied in with current government agendas? And then I guess that the last question you have to ask yourself is, are there any places that I can look at and say, these are likely more unbiased, unregulated, uncontrolled? And what's been really interesting about the internet, for example, is that when the internet emerged, and it emerged before I got involved in 2004, but it really kind of started to take traction in 2004.
Yeah, for sure.
Social media wasn't there yet. So when the internet first started, it was just completely unregulated and people putting a bunch of information in there, and you were basically asked to be an adult and
imagine that concept.
Imagine that concept, right? Have some personal responsibility over
information, Aaron.
What you believe, what rabbit hole you got to go, what you buy, whatever. It was like the Wild West, right? So then that was the first iteration, and it was complete free speech. So that was first iteration.
That's a good point.
And then social media came about, and the great thing about social media is the first versions of it were a tool for people to connect.
It was pretty much MySpace, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, there was a bunch.
Was it one of the? MySpace was the biggest of the first.
It was the first big one. Yeah. And then
that thing fizzled fast with Facebook.
There's actually been 370 different social media outlets that have made a serious go at cracking this space, and almost every single one of them has failed. The only ones that have really got any traction along the way are Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Rumble's kind of hanging on and growing.
Rumble's new though. Rumble's the alternative.
Rumble's new,
to
right?
YouTube.
But there's new ones
it's a new sheriff in town. But there's always new coming in, cycling in and out.
They're trying to break through. They're trying to break through, right? And so social media was all about connection. And what was really great about that is that you could connect with your local friends, your international friends. You could plan things together.
Post pictures.
You could educate
catch up with college buddies.
Together. Like, it was a connection tool. And then the connection tool, when they started to put things in like being able to broadcast, it transitioned from being a connection tool to a broadcast tool.
Right.
And somewhere in the broadcast era, the government and money started to get involved.
Are you trying to tell me it might have become an industry?
Well, they started to
or an industrial complex?
Yeah, they started to dictate what things were allowed to be broadcast. And this is not speculation. If you go watch the interview with Mark Zuckerberg, for example, on Joe Rogan, he said the FBI called and said, we're treating Biden's son's issues as misinformation.
Holy moly.
And basically, you better do the same thing as well, or you're going to have a problem with the FBI and the DOJ. And Mark Zuckerberg was like, what do you do
when the president decides that he's going to be a mob leader and come
right? If you have
bully and blackmail you, like black and white emails, by the way. You know, the Freedom of Information Act has this in black and white for those going, nah, that could never happen in America. Got those docs too.
Right. And if you put yourself in Zuckerberg's position, okay? Zuckerberg
and it was a good interview, Aaron.
It was a good interview.
Like, I was kind of expecting him to be kind of, like a prick about it. He was like
weird. I thought he was going to be a really weird
I thought
guy.
He was likable. I enjoyed the interview. It was 3 hours. I thought Rogan did an amazing job as always.
He was way more likable.
What the hell are you doing down there, by the way?
Sorry, I've actually, my AC unit is like dripping on my floor.
Is that right? That's not good during the show, man. Can't you make that happen after the show?
I'd say most people are listening to us anyway. You're the only one drawing attention to it.
That's true. That's a good point. All
right. I want to finish this point. So imagine you're Mark Zuckerberg, and if you watch the movie The Social Network, you'll understand what I'm saying. If you've never watched the movie The Social Network, absolutely 100% you should watch the movie The Social Network, which is the movie about why Zuckerberg started Facebook and how it all came to fruition and so on and so forth. So Mark Zuckerberg's this guy who's very awkward, extremely intelligent, can't get any dates because he's kind of a weird dude, and he's trying to create something to get attention from females. That's the only reason that Facebook was developed.
Was it really about the girls? Or
100%.
Is that right? I didn't know that part.
No, 100%. It was 100% driven by the fact that he wanted to get attention from females.
That is so funny.
So he develops Facebook. It takes off. He becomes one of the richest people in the world. Now he's not only rich, he has power, he has influence, he has control. What's the one thing that can rip all of that away from him? It's a battle with the government and the legal establishment.
Yeah.
It's the one thing he's terrified of is black trench coats walking into Facebook's headquarters because they can rip it all away from him.
Regulation, baby. Regulation. Yep.
So he gets a call from the FBI or the DOJ and says, we're treating this as information.
We're going to tell you how to deal with it.
Right. And
how about that one?
And that's one example. That's only one example. We don't know how many other examples there are like this.
Aaron, now, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Now these different channels, we don't know to what degree they're actually being curated in their information by the powers that be. So it's gone from being a Wild West to a connection to a broadcast tool to a curated broadcast tool, canceling people that don't fit
the narrative, right?
They don't fit the narrative, right? And what happens is when things push too far in one direction, it's kind of like capitalism, right? When you push too far in one direction, there's an opportunity that comes and somebody goes and fills that opportunity, right? Now, all these people are saying, I don't want to consume here anymore. And capitalists are saying, ooh, there's opportunity because we could sell over here ads to people who don't want to be over here anymore.
Great point.
Let's create an alternative. Enter Elon Musk with Twitter. Enter Trump with Rumble. I don't know who.
No, Trump was his own. Trump was his own Truth Network, which I don't know much about.
My
that.
bad.
And that's is that like a? I've never been on it. Is that like a Twitter?
Truth is kind of hanging on.
I don't think it's really that successful, is it?
It's okay. Rumble came in and put their 2 cents in, and then this new one that you're talking about.
Substack's huge, by the way.
Substack, right?
And Spotify with podcasts is enormous.
And that's what I was going to say next, right? Now that's what I was going to say is you may not know where podcasts fit in this information choice battle.
But it's streaming and it's internet and it's there.
So number one, it's kind of got a foot in two camps. And the reason why it has a foot in two camps is because people also love to watch video. Mm-hmm. So if you look at somebody like Rogan, he's got clips of his shows on YouTube where he was almost canceled when he was ruthlessly attacked.
He's had many sound bites and shows canceled by YouTube. Not one canceled by Substack, not one canceled by Spotify, and not one canceled by Rumble. By the way, because that's free speech.
Right. And what does that tell you? Well, this it's not new.
The other internet, Aaron.
It's the other
internet. The tale of two internets. Here we are.
Is you've got the audio world, the podcast world, where Spotify not only said, hey, Joe, we'll give you $100 million to have exclusivity on our platform, when they were hammered by the government, by influencers to cancel Joe Rogan, and their stock price was plummeting. Right. They had a CEO with enough balls to say, we will not cower.
We will not be bullied.
This pressure.
Right.
We will not be bullied. We will not be taken out. And they took their stock price went like this, and everyone said they're screwed. And he said, "You watch what happened. Now their stock price has gone boom because they."
Happy to see that. I was so happy to see that because I know exactly why it happened. I was so happy to see it.
Yeah. So right now the audio side seems to be very unmanipulated, and that's why you're seeing the RFKs. You're seeing the Dr. Robert. That was
the biggie, by the way, for Joe. I'll get back to it, but Malone was
Jordan
the biggie.
Petersons, Tucker Carlson going to Twitter, and I'm not saying I like all of these people. I'm just saying they're going to where the freedom of information or the lack of manipulation from big industry or big government. Now, will they always stay that way? Who knows? You won't know. But right now, there really is this tale of two internets happening where there's the information and the manipulation.
You just gave a really awesome timeline of all that, by the way. I'm glad you did that. That was really cool the way you took it from and again, we've been doing this we've been internet marketing guys for so long that it's like when you're in an industry, you see it obviously from a deep insider versus an outsider. So we've seen the internet and this censorship industrial complex is really a new phenomenon over the last couple of years. It's a new phenomenon only under this White House. This didn't happen. This has never happened under Obama. It's never happened under Bush. Didn't happen under Trump. It's a new phenomenon, which is pushing information, Aaron, to your point, to the podcast networks. Now, what's interesting about what you said is the podcast is probably now, in your analogy of where the internet was when we got started, where it was like kind of new, say whatever you want. Everybody's throwing stones. It's the wild west.
It's really like 10
they
years
haven't attacked the industry and the government. It hasn't been hit by the government yet, although they're probably salivating to get it because they got to get it before the 2024 election, right? And I'm predicting that they will, by the way, which is a long shot conspiracy theory here. I'm hoping they don't, but I'm predicting that they will because they're losing so much steam with these great conversations that are happening with really awesome change makers and thought leaders like RFK and Vivek Ramaswamy and guys like that are just coming in and throwing stones, and it's really awesome to see. But it is now, I think, where, to your point, where the internet was, where it's this foundational period. So it remains to be seen how it goes from here. But right now, that is for me personally, I don't know. I think you as well, Aaron. You and I go back and forth sharing podcast episodes. I love those 2 and 3 hour conversations. Most people look at it and they go, I could never listen to this for 3 hours, but really it's like an audiobook. I mean, you listen to 20 minutes here. I walk a lot in the morning, so I'll do a 2-mile walk, and that's 30 minutes right there. Yep. I might cook lunch one day for myself. That's 15 minutes there. I mean, working out, preparing for the workout in the morning, 15 minutes there. So I'll get through a 2-3 hour podcast in a week in chunks. And I enjoy that.
It all just depends on what your preference is, and probably in most cases what you've actually been conditioned to. Because what we've been conditioned to is 8-minute show, 4-minute commercial, 8-minute show, 4-minute commercial.
And I do that too. I like to pop into that form of media as well. I'll pop into CNN and Fox News. I try to go back and forth to see just the massive disparity. I enjoy going back and forth and seeing what is this network focused on because they're funded by who, to your point earlier, and what is this network focused on because they're funded by who. And then, of course, is there a YouTube video that's still not censored yet that goes like for 45 minutes that I can listen to? Cool. Is it on Rumble? Is it on Substack? I take it all in, and it gives me amazing balance. I'm a information consumer, multiple sources, as you know, preferably offline, because the offline piece is secure now. I feel like when I got it in my hand, I'm looking around my office right now to share anything new, which I'll get to in a minute. But I like to get it physically when I can, because at some point, are they going to change history? They'll do it. Are they going to change the words and the meanings? They're specialists at that, right? So I like to get the physical as much as I can and balance that out as well. It's I'm a little bit of a fanatic with the way I consume, but it's, to me, we're in some times now that if you're not, you're going to be really behind the curve.
And I think what you can take away from this conversation is there's two types of information, not only on the internet right now, but in the marketplace in general, right? It's the manipulated, sponsored information, and then there's really the personal opinion information.
Sure.
And you have to find a balance, obviously, between the two, but you have to choose where you're going to consume from. And there's pros and cons, obviously, to all of it. Mm-hmm. But also from a business standpoint, you have to start to know where these different outlets are, because they could work really well for your business or they couldn't. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So we spend a lot of money on the big four. And here are things that we've learned. TikTok, for example, is a younger generation, but for whatever reason, maybe because of their experience and how they were developed with social media and digital marketing, they all have ADD. So, for example, you can't have a commercial running longer than 30 seconds and keep their attention. 15 really is what TikTok suggests. Yeah.
It's just like a giant commercial video style network.
It's literally just people like bouncing around, like that's the scrolling speed.
I have never logged in personally. Do you have a TikTok account, Aaron?
I do not, because I don't choose to consume my information there, but obviously I have to do the research and I have to, it's part of running an agency, right? Yeah. So everything has to be super sharp cuts, because the amount of time spent on each piece of content in TikTok is the fastest in the industry. So you have to know who's there and how they respond. If you look at Facebook and Instagram now, it's an evolving platform that's really targeted more towards the 40 and up in Facebook, and I would say at absolute max 25 and up in Instagram. It's an evolving aged platform. And the fortunate thing there is the older demographics, they have all the money. So there's lots of money to be made over there, right? And then you look at like the YouTube's actually more of like a search engine than a disruption channel, because people are in there looking for information. So they tend to be more intelligent. They tend to have more money, but also tends to be a little bit more expensive to advertise in those things. And then obviously you have the search engines, which is all disruption based. So, somebody searches something, you get in front of them. They're a very high intent customer. But now you're starting to see these different alternatives pop up, your Truths, your Rumbles, your Substacks, your Twitter. Like Twitter has never been financially viable, just so we're clear. Twitter has never made money, ever, because they haven't figured out how to.
They never cracked the ad network.
People
don't advertise there that much like they do on Facebook. I mean, you would see it more than anybody.
Of course. And so with the new boss at the helm in Elon, you know that they're going to be very actively trying to figure out how to do that. Mm-hmm. But you have all of these different personalities. If you've got a product that's for example, anti-establishment or disruptive or whatever, you go put those things in those channels, you're likely to see a huge spike in your sales, because it matches the personalities of the people.
Right.
You have a very generic, one of my buddies sells on Amazon. He sells stuff like engraved golf balls in a leather sack shaped like your scrotum, that you hang off your golf bag. Like,
are you serious?
Like stupid gag gift stuff, right? You'll sell that kind of stuff. Sells like crazy on Facebook and Instagram, because quite frankly, it's a lower IQ platform of people, where you probably wouldn't sell any of that in those other channels. And it's just good to start to understand where people are living, the type of avatar that's there, what they consume, what their preferences are, because there may be opportunities that you're just not seeing.
Absolutely.
Because you don't even know they exist.
Yeah, really.
So it's
good
not
point.
just about what you consume, but how you're marketing, your idea, your concept, your philosophy, your product, your whatever. If and it kind of goes back to your point with the Uber driver, right? And I'm not saying all Uber drivers are dumb, but the reality
wasn't even suggesting it. I just was a guy who's on Main Street all day long, right?
Right, a guy who's literally working to eat, probably 2 or 3 jobs, doesn't really have a lot of time to do research or consume information. He's just absorbing what's fed to him because he doesn't have the time to. Those people, they're not on, Rumble and Twitter.
Substack, they're podcasts.
They're listening to the news on a radio still or whatever.
CNN or Fox, depending on whether they're liberal or conservative. That's
right.
all it comes down to.
And is that your customer? Is that your customer? If it is, okay, you know where to go. If it's not, do you really want to be shelling out your money into those places when the wrong person is living there?
Yeah, great point. Great point. 2 lessons to walk away from on this, by the way. One personal, one business. The personal one is knowing that there are 2 internets and knowing that you probably should be hearing both sides, because we're so divided right now that you don't want to be all in on one side. You really want to be hearing both sides so that you can make an intelligent decision and think about where does it affect you from a health and a political and a business standpoint, right? That's why I love following really good thought leaders on Substack and Spotify from an audio standpoint, because they're completely uncensored. Rumble as well. I've been starting to look at some content on Rumble that absolutely positively wouldn't last 10 seconds on YouTube. Now, my big question, Aaron, would be if first of all, if anything is being censored, I don't care what the topic is, we're adults in America, to your point earlier. If anything is being censored, I immediately want to consume all of it right off the bat. Because if you don't, then again, subconsciously your cognitive dissonance is kicking in, and either you're afraid of what you're going to find, or you're afraid your intelligence is going to be insulted. I encourage anyone to somehow have enough awareness to catch that and want to know what's going on. The amount of censorship that took place during COVID alone, when it comes to medicine in children, even we talk about children. I'm looking at my bookshelf, Aaron. I must have millions of pages of it in physical form. It's so out of control, right? You should want to know that, right? You should want to know what's going on, good or bad, Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. So from a personal standpoint, it's that balance of information and maintaining some offline information as well, right? I always try to, like I said, tale of 2 internets, mainstream media, alternative media like Substack, Rumble, and podcasts, and then physical media, right? From a business standpoint, I think you made a great point. Demographics. What I'm noticing now, and this is really important, is tale of 2 internets. The censorship complex internet tends to be far left wing. The other side, the Twitters and the Substacks of the world, tends to be far right wing. I shouldn't say far, because sometimes that has a negative feel. Conservative versus liberal. What I'm finding is the conservatives and liberals used to really play well together. They used to get along. Listen, we've always had 2 parties in America. Get over it. Suddenly now it's a big thing that we have 2 parties. Like, these people are so crazy. Like, oh, all of a sudden one party can't talk, but one can. Come on, we've always had 2 parties, right? But what I'm noticing from an advertising standpoint, if you know that your demographic is either liberal or conservative, you're going to find a ton of liberals who love censorship, by the way. I don't know when this happened. And you're going to find a ton of conservatives who want free speech and independence. So if your demographic is either one, then you're going to probably find better advertising success in the new alternative free speech internet than you will in the industrial in the censorship industrial complex internet, I call it, which is Facebook and YouTube and mainstream media, which is very interesting.
And these things, they don't say stagnant. This is the other important thing to remember, right? Like, you got to remember RFK's in a party that doesn't agree with a lot of things you do, and quite frankly doesn't agree with a lot of the things he does, that he agrees with.
Oh, they don't agree with anything he says.
And so things ebb and flow, and really what drives those things is consumer behavior, right? If people start leaving somewhere in droves, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So when we first started marketing, the revelation was Google AdWords. And you remember the idea that like the concept that I could get in front of somebody who's actively searching for my thing and put my thing there in front of them was like the creation of fire. And most
really
people
was.
They didn't get it. Most people didn't get it. They didn't understand.
We hit that. That's how we met, Aaron. We met,
hit a freaking howitzer.
It was like digging for gold and finding the mother lode.
Absolutely.
Remember that window we had? It was like a 2-year window.
We just dominated everything.
It was incredible.
And made millions and millions and millions of dollars. So they became so powerful that they became flippant towards their customers. And you got to remember, the customers aren't people. Man. They aren't using Google. Those aren't the customers, because those people don't pay anything. The customers are the advertisers. So they became so flippant towards their advertisers, because they essentially had a monopoly, that it almost became impossible to work with Google. And then Facebook came out and they started their ad network, and they were the friendliest, most helpful, supportive people on earth. And it worked.
They were the new kid on the block.
And it worked. Key thing, it worked. And people left Google in droves. And Google internally went, oh shit, what just happened? How do we turn this around? And they actually, smart enough for them, they started to survey people, and people like me said, your customer service sucks, period. And now the crazy thing is Facebook really struggles with compliance and customer service. It's a black hole for a lot of advertisers. And Google is like, come on in. Let me give you a personal rep. Let me walk through your stuff with you. How can I help? Would you like to get on the phone? And now all of a sudden I see the Facebook people saying, oh, Mr. Parkinson, can I get on the phone with you? And I'm like, what just happened? Right? And it's the consumers that drive it. So if the consumers start moving their eyeballs or their advertising money into other places, they have no choice but to adapt. So that's why things don't often stay stagnant, is because you got to remember, at the end of the day, it's all about where are the eyeballs and where are the money, and you either adapt or you die. So they don't necessarily stay stagnant either.
Yeah, well said. It's a very interesting phenomenon. As a business owner, looping it back to as a business owner, a lot of this will dictate where you're going to get the best result with your money from an advertising standpoint. I think looping back, but this was more of a personal show, The Tale of Two Internets today, because it is very concerning what's going on. You don't have to. Do you have to? Sometimes you have to jump off early. I want to keep going if you can.
I've got another 5 minutes. I can go.
Good, because I wanted you to talk about. You wanted to talk about this issue going on with the movie in Hollywood. I wanted to get your take on that. You talked about in the beginning. What's the movie again with the kid in the football movie?
Yeah, it's a movie called The Blind Side.
The Blind Side, that's it.
Right, and really the interesting thing I wanted to say is, again, you got to remember that Hollywood, it likes to frame itself as entertainment, but if you don't realize the type of information that is inserted into your brain, and the producers, i.e. the people who have money behind it, and who they're tied to, then you're not really paying attention. Or
Aaron, back to your point earlier, who's funding the movie?
Who's funding the movie?
It's just like who's funding CNN?
Who's funding the movie? You see, and a lot of people don't even understand the term.
Industrial complex, man.
Like when
change the name of the show to The Industrial Complex Exposed. How about that?
Yeah. Like, sorry, go ahead. When was the last time you ever sat down and looked at who was the producer and who were the executive producers? So just so you know what producer means, it means the people who put the money in to make the movie. Okay. And who are they close with? What type of business relationship do they have? My point is there's always somebody's money behind it. And in many times it is just great entertainment. And in many other times it's entertainment plus what type of narrative can
subliminal messaging
to put in there, right? And that will dictate buying behaviors and consumer behaviors in the future. And so it's really important to realize that the majority of what you see from Hollywood, even if they say it's true, is an untruth. And as long as you can accept that and still have joy and entertainment out of it, that's great. But the big one this week is the movie The Blind Side.
And
right?
Before you get into it, I don't think you or I are suggesting here that every single movie is funded with dark money. That's
absolutely
not
at all.
But in any kind of industry, there are going to be the bad players. And it's nice to know how to look out for that by having a balanced consumption of information.
Absolutely.
Tale of two internets, audio versus internet, mainstream media versus alternative media. When you take it all in, you actually can spot that better.
And it's kind of fun when you come at it and you watch something and you ask yourself, like, is there any like alternative agenda or subliminal planning in this movie? And it's almost like Easter eggs.
It's fun it's fun to find, isn't it?
Where you kind of find it,
yes,
right?
yes.
And so,
right.
you know, just the example this week that we're talking about is Michael Orr, who played for the New England Patriots. The Sandra Bullock won an Oscar for the movie The Blind Side. Really good, feel-good film. Loved the film. Was amazing. One of my wife's favorites. And it turns out this week he's now sued the Tuohys, which were the parents that adopted him, because they didn't really adopt him. It actually ended up being a conservatory. He thought he was part of the family. He wasn't part of the family. And he didn't like the way that he was depicted in the movie, because he was depicted as basically this big, you know, fat, athletic kid that was living on the streets. And he had a really tough childhood, no question about it. But he was actually already a first-team all-state football player in Tennessee, and he was also an all-star in basketball. Mm-hmm. And he said, I didn't like the way I was depicted of that I was dumb, that I wasn't already successful in sports. I wasn't dumb. I already was successful in sports, and our relationship, you know, helped that flourish. There's no questions about it. But also the fact that Hollywood said we were going to make all this money. Not only did we not make a lot of money, but the money that we did get, it wasn't given to me by the Tuohys. So now he's suing the Tuohys. And there's the story that was told, and there's the story that is, right? And it's very rare that the story that is gets a lot of limelight and exposure, and it really is because the movie was so successful and he played for the Patriots. But how many of these stories that are told that we're just consuming and putting in the operating system are actually not true at all. But we're potentially letting them dictate our thought patterns and our behavior.
First thing I would say about that story, which I know a tiny bit about, you know more, is why now?
Good question.
This movie was 20 years old, right? So timing is something I look at as well. Timing, track records, industrial complex, three things, right? Why now? And what's the problem? Is it a money thing? Is it a race thing? Is it a political thing? What's the problem? So I hear noise, but what's the problem and why now?
Right. I've been asking the same things as I'm reading it. You know, is he having financial problems? So now he's looking.
So I smell agenda immediately.
Where is the agenda? Right. But I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of what's his particular agenda at this point. I really wanted to focus on the fact that
does he want money from the family? Does he want money? Okay, so maybe it's a money grab. I mean, this stuff happens every day, right?
That's not the rabbit hole I wanted to go down of what is.
I understand your lesson here. I understand your lesson here.
What I wanted to focus on is we got delivered this polished gem, which created all this emotion inside of us. It was a feel-good story, race relations, helping a kid go on to be successful.
Checked all the boxes of a great American movie.
Great American movie, and the reality is there was a lot of fabrication to that story.
Which is fine because it's Hollywood, and they're never going to be, if it's based on a true story, we all know that they have the disclaimers. You know, I'm not here to defend Hollywood all that much because they're as radical as they come, but it says it in the movie. This is based on a true story. However, certain events are depicted and might be sensationalized and might be fictionalized. Yeah. No problem. That's movies.
But it's also eyeballs, right? Is TV controls eyeballs. Radio controls eyeballs. Streaming controls eyeballs. Phones, internet, Hollywood, movies control eyeballs. And when you control eyeballs, you're really putting programming into an operating system of millions of people at a time.
Right.
And so anytime you are consuming something from somewhere, it's just really important to remember that many times there's an agenda behind it, or it's a fabrication, or somebody's trying to plant something in your head, and you have to be a little bit objective about what you're watching, what you're listening, what you're reading.
Right.
You know, because you just don't, unless you go do the research like you do all the time, you don't know who owns it, who's funding it, where the money's coming from, who's driving it.
Here's the last litmus test for me, which I'll leave with Aaron. It's who stands to make the most money from the info and who stands to lose it all. So what I've been doing now, different litmus test, is some of the people I follow on Substack, remember, uncensored content. Some of the podcasts I listen to, at this time, uncensored content. Some of the political candidates I follow, right? Like, first thing I want to know is, based on what's said, is who stands to make the most and who stands to lose the most. And the people that I'm following the closest and that I stay with are people who've put it all on the line, lost careers, lost practices, lost medical licenses for speaking out, for sharing data, and for trying to be a warrior for humanity. That's an RFK Jr., that's a Dr. Malone, that's a Dr. Peter McCullough. All of it on the line. Everything lost. Ultimate sacrifices made. Practices destroyed to want to communicate with humanity to create a better environment around us. Mainly, I'm speaking from a medical and a health standpoint. Mm-hmm. But the lesson here is who's making the most and who stands to lose the most. Now, is that litmus test going to be accurate 100% of the time? Nope, but it's 99%. 99% of the time, when I see who's delivering that message and who's producing that content or who's sharing that study or that data or who's doing the 3-hour show on Joe Rogan or on Patrick Bet-David's show, another great show. Again, who stands to make the most, who stands to lose the most? And it's very accurate, Aaron, because if we just look at the amount of money that was made on the COVID-19 vaccine, for example, something like $100 billion, and then you have doctors coming out who are saying, you know what, I'm not so sure about efficacy and safety here, and they get censored and lose their career. Well, there's my math. That guy has nothing to gain. He just lost his career. He doesn't want to see people get hurt. They just made $100 billion. Like, the conversation's over at that point. What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting when somebody who spent 8 to 12 years to get a degree,
throwing it doesn't have to
likely racked up massive amounts of student debt. Finally, and most people who go into medicine because they have a burning desire to help humanity, and the money is a benefit. It takes a really long time 100%. To get profitable in the medical industry. You have to go through a lot of school, a lot of loans, a lot of education, a lot of initial, working from the bottom up. It seems financially viable, but it's a very, very tough thing to become wealthy in.
Very tough.
That person willing to risk their reputation and their clinic to voice an opinion.
And their licensing.
Versus somebody who has zero risk whatsoever in the situation saying you're a liar, but a huge upside to gain financially.
Industrial complex. When you go against, in this case, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and you put your career on the line, to your point, and there's many, many, many doctors we can end. The list is in the thousands now. They've come together and they've created alliances and alternative medical networks, and they're really doing some amazing things because they're in the prevention mind space, not the treatment mind space. Right. It's fascinating to watch, but why is that math so difficult for some, Aaron? Who stands to make the most? Who stands to lose it all? I want to know. I want to hear from the guy who stands to lose it all. I still want to listen to the industrial complex or the person who stands to make the most. No problem if you want to make money, if you're doing it ethically, fair enough. But if you're censoring people along the way and canceling alternative views and destroying previous medicinal protocols that might inhibit or take swipes at your new profit oil stream here, right? That's a different story, a very different story. So it's fascinating. It's interesting. But again, it's the tale of two internets to the point of the show. And there really is, unfortunately, where I think this is going, Aaron, not to veer off again, but unfortunately where this is going is because there's two internets, there's massive divide in the people, which we know already. We've never been more divided as a culture than we are right now. They said Trump was the great divider, but Biden made Trump look like Mother Teresa when it comes to dividing. So right now where we are, I actually think it's going to get so much worse leading up to 2024 that hardcore Republicans and hardcore, like far left, far right, they will be arch enemies. There will be social unrest. There could be internal civil wars. We're kind of seeing it now in pockets in some of our states around America, as you know. It's problematic to have two internets. It's problematic to have two sources of information. It's problematic to be censoring so much that another internet has to be formed. Right? So this is the problem. This isn't all a good thing that we're talking about right here. Tale of two internets is not to anyone's benefit. It's actually going to create the greatest divide amongst information and people that we've ever seen. And there's only a couple people that can come and attack the complex and heal it. At this point, it's RFK. It's DeSantis. It's Vivek Ramaswamy. It isn't Trump or Biden. I mean, they're just...
But it's also entrepreneurs. And it's
entrepreneurs. It is, yeah.
Is that, yes, having two internets is definitely problematic because it creates a divide, because you got one group of people that's just fed, and you got one group of people that's feeding themselves.
Right on.
And so it's problematic from that perspective, but it actually is giving me a lot of optimism and hope.
Good to hear.
That I'm seeing somebody like an Elon Musk come in and say, I'll give anybody the floor. We're totally happy to have Trump and his crazy shit on here.
Of course.
And we're totally happy to have Kanye back on and his crazy shit on here. And
who cares, right, Aaron?
And the reality is, we're going to trust you people to make your own judgment and your own opinion like adults.
How insulting is it when they actually think they have to regulate information because an adult might be offended? Are you serious right now?
It's insane.
It's because it's an industrial complex. It isn't because
you're
the good of their heart decided one day, I want to protect the people from information. No.
Well, and like I talk about a lot, when you push too hard one way, eventually somebody starts pushing back hard. And now you're starting to see the pushback come the other way, where the Spotify pushed back, Elon's pushed back with Twitter, Rumble is pushing back, Substack is pushing back. And so it got really, really bad about 4 years ago.
Well,
really
no, about
bad.
2 years ago. It wasn't 4 years ago.
It
was with COVID. COVID was the on-ramp to it. Listen, the reason I keep coming back to COVID is because COVID is the on-ramp to everything we're seeing. They had to have it to be able to do this, which is very concerning.
It's the most blatant example.
It is.
No question about it. But I think there was a lot of stuff happening that wasn't as obvious in front of our eyes before that.
That's true.
And so that
I think COVID became the spotlight.
It really amplified it and really like put it out on display of like, we're controlling this, right? And so, up until really 2 years ago, I wasn't feeling very inspired by where this was going, and now I'm feeling inspired because people are putting their own money, their own reputations, their own freedom on the line to say this matters enough to me.
Licenses and money on the line, Aaron. That's
and
my
saying,
guy and
I'm
my
willing
gal.
to gamble.
That's my guy and my gal right there, right?
Yep. And you're seeing it happen now because it had enough. And so it gives me some hope that we'll see everything kind of push back the other way.
I'm really glad you said that, because I was thinking it this morning. I was just wrapping up the Joe Rogan, Patrick Bet David podcast, which was awesome. These are, by the way, if anybody doesn't know by now, of course, Rogan's been light years ahead of everybody for a long time. But Patrick Bet David, I think, is probably number 2. These guys probably have the biggest 2 podcasts that exist today. Aaron, I'm thinking to myself as you'll appreciate this, and we'll close here. As I'm listening to the 2-3 hour interview, I'm like, it is such a pleasure to listen to men talking. Men. Real men talking in an era where masculinity tends to be under attack right now. And I'm listening to men who are throwing their money on the line and throwing their voices on the line and throwing careers on the line to shine a spotlight on the industrial complexes that are now driving the American way. And it's happening, and it's compounding, and you're absolutely right. I gives me great hope. You and I are going to rebrand our whole show. A big reason why we're doing it is because we're coming. And we're coming for anyone that's coming for the kids. And we're coming in for anyone that's coming for free speech. And we're coming for anybody that's going to take a crack at the freedom that we get every day to run our business the way we want to run it. And it's happening everywhere. So it is very hopeful. I get off those podcasts, and I do feel very inspired. And I do, like, to your point, uplifting. I'm like, the groundswell's happening. It's almost like Star Wars. Remember the Resistance? The Resistance is happening. We're not going to take the totalitarianism, communism, censorship complex anymore. And I think, if anything, I invite every listener that we have on the show, if you're like, what the hell are they talking about today? I invite you to learn more about what we're talking about here today, because it's going to dramatically affect our future if that pace keeps up. But to your point, I'm very hopeful that the resistance is starting to take hold and people are starting to wake up, which is amazing.
You're seeing it.
You're seeing it.
You're seeing it.
You're seeing it. All right, man. Good stuff. I'm going to wrap it there. Don't know when the new show will be out and rebranded, but all previous episodes are at salesvelocitytv.com. This was a great one, Aaron. Always love doing this with you, man. I got to get you into Naples, into the studio. We have this Aaron's in Cayman Islands. He's down there in his own little world, and on the island. I'm here in South Florida, but we have an amazing podcast studio where we gotta go live in studio, bring a couple of guests in. I think we'll push towards that here as we start to rebrand.
We definitely have some interesting ones that would love to be on the show.
Absolutely. So I'm going to wrap it there. That's Aaron. I'm Andrew. We will see you in the next episode of Sales Velocity TV. Again, head over to salesvelocitytv.com. You can download the show on all your favorite podcast platforms or catch us on YouTube, and we'll see you in the next one.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Sales Velocity TV is powered by Pipeline Pro, the ultimate all-in-one sales pipeline management and marketing automation platform that makes all others obsolete. And we can prove it. Take a tour at gopipelinepro.com. See you on the next episode.